If you grew up with a mother who competed with you, it creates a kind of pain that is difficult to explain because it violates something so basic that most people don't even have a language for it. A daughter should not have to brace against her own mother. A daughter should not have to monitor whether her joy, beauty, confidence, intelligence, success, or visibility will trigger tension in the very person who was supposed to help her become herself safely. But that is exactly what many daughters live with. And because it is so unnatural, you often don't recognize it clearly at first. You feel it long before you can actually name it. You feel it in the strange shift that happens when something good happens to you. You feel it when your excitement is met with flatness. When your achievements are skimmed over. When your pain gets more attention than your progress. When your radiance seems to create irritation instead of warmth. You feel it when a compliment towards you somehow becomes about her. You feel it when your individuality is tolerated only as long as it does not outshine, disturb, or separate. This is part of what makes it so psychologically confusing. It is rarely presented in a way that is obvious enough for other people to immediately recognize it. It often hides inside comments that can be dismissed, inside body language, facial expressions, inside subtle withdrawal, inside comparison, inside faint praise that contains a bit of an edge, inside advice that is really control, inside concern that quietly chips away at your confidence, inside moments where you are left feeling deflated and you cannot quite explain why. So you question yourself. Every step of the way, you question yourself. You tell yourself maybe you are being unfair. Maybe she's just insecure. Maybe she didn't mean it like that. Maybe you're too aware. Maybe you are picking up on something that isn't really there. Maybe you're paranoid. But your body will always keep the record. Your body knows the difference between being loved and being managed. Your body knows the difference between support and resentment wearing a socially acceptable face. Your body knows when someone is not celebrating your expansion because your expansion threatens something in them. That is an incredibly painful thing for a daughter to have to feel toward her mother, because it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It reshapes development. A daughter who is being subtly competed with by her own mother learns that becoming herself is not entirely safe. She learns that being admired may come with consequences. She learns that being seen may create tension or punishment. She learns that confidence may be interpreted as defiance. She learns that beauty may invite criticism. She learns that success may create distance. She learns that the more solid she becomes in herself, the more uneasy the atmosphere will feel. So she begins adjusting. She downplays herself. She becomes careful with her brightness. She can't shine too bright. She softens her wins before sharing them. She makes herself smaller in rooms where she should be free. She edits how much pleasure she shows. She edits how much confidence she reveals. She edits her truth, her style, her body, her voice, her power. Not because she has consciously chosen self-betrayal, but because her nervous system has learned that self-expression comes with relational cost. This is one of the deepest wounds daughters carry from these dynamics. It is not only that they were criticized, it is that they were conditioned to experience their own emergence as dangerous. And when that happens early enough, you don't always call it competition. You just call it home. You call it normal. You call it our relationship. You call it she's complicated. You call it she's just having a bad day. You call it I know she loves me in her own way. You learn to work around it instead of outright naming it. But something in you always knows. You know because there were moments when you wanted to share something beautiful and instinctively held back. You know because you could feel when the energy shifted. You know because part of you was always trying to gauge whether it was safe to shine. You know because there were times you felt more comfortable failing than thriving. Because failure was more familiar and less provocative. You know because your joy was not always received as joy. Sometimes it was received as a disruption. That has real consequences in adulthood. It truly does. Many daughters of narcissistic mothers struggle not only with self-worth, but with visibility. They can be deeply intelligent, gifted, beautiful, capable, spiritually mature, and still feel an almost involuntary contraction when it is time to fully stand in their power. Not because they lack power, but because power was not mirrored back to them as safe. It was mirrored back as something that could create envy, criticism, sabotage, or emotional withdrawal. So, even when the mother is no longer in the room, the pattern remains in the body. You may still dim automatically. You may have valuable insights that took you years to be courageous enough to get on camera and share. You may still over-explain. You may still second-guess your confidence. You may still feel guilty when you are doing well. You may still hide your gifts from people who have done nothing wrong, simply because your system learned that visibility comes with attack. You may still feel a strange grief when you are thriving because part of you knows you were never, ever properly celebrated in your becoming. That grief matters. It may not be going on with her directly right now, but it is still there. And it has impacted so many of your choices. Many women think the wound is only about what was said or done, but often the deeper wound is what never happened. You were never deeply delighted in. You were never fully safe to become. You were not emotionally met in your expansion. You may have been tolerated, used, shaped, controlled, criticized, compared, projected onto, even admired in fragmented ways, but not truly mothered in the places where your selfhood needed blessing. And that is a real loss. It is a loss worth grieving, not to stay trapped there, but because naming the loss is part of healing the distortion. When you do not name it, you tend to keep adapting to it. When you do name it, something begins to separate. You begin to see that your shrinking was not your personality. It was a strategy. Your self-doubt was not an inherent flaw. It was conditioning. Your fear of being fully seen was not irrational. It was learned in relationship. That is why healing from this dynamic is not just about understanding your mother. In many ways, spending too much time trying to understand her can become another detour. The more important question is, what happened to you inside this dynamic? What did this train you to do? What did you learn to suppress? What did you learn to fear? What did you have to cut off from yourself in order to remain connected? Did you cut off your pride? Did you cut off your voice? Did you cut off your sensuality? Did you cut off your ambition? Did you cut off your visibility? Did you cut off your right to take up space without apology? That is where the work becomes sacred. Because healing is not simply recognizing that she competed. Healing is refusing to keep competing against yourself on her behalf. And many daughters do exactly that without recognizing it. The mother may no longer need to minimize you because you have internalized the minimization. She may no longer need to interrupt your expansion because part of you now does it automatically. She may no longer need to diminish your light because you have learned to put a shade over it before anyone else can react. This is where self-compassion becomes non-negotiable. Not fake self-love, not fake self-love language, not empty affirmations. Real compassion, the kind that understands why your system adapted the way it did. The kind that does not shame you for still hesitating. The kind that can look at your patterns with honesty and tenderness at the same time. The kind that says, of course this has been hard. Of course being seen has felt complicated. Of course joy has felt vulnerable. Of course success has carried an undertow. Your body learned all of that somewhere. And then from that compassionate honesty, you began to reclaim yourself. You begin to notice where you still apologize for your gifts. You begin to notice where you still prepare for backlash when something goes well. You begin to notice where you still hide your happiness. You begin to notice where you still make yourself less beautiful, less brilliant, less expressed, less alive, so no one feels threatened. And slowly, steadily, you stop participating in your own diminishment. You let yourself be proud without rushing to soften it. You let yourself be visible without collapsing afterward. You let yourself enjoy your beauty without guilt. You let yourself succeed without waiting for criticism to bring you back down. You let yourself become more of who you are, even if that would have made someone else uncomfortable. That is not cruelty. That is not ego. That is repair. Because a mother who competes with her daughter does not just wound the daughter's heart. She interferes with the daughter's relationship to her own life force. She makes self-expression feel relationally dangerous. She makes expansion feel costly. She places a daughter in an impossible bind. Betray yourself or risk tension with the person who should love you most naturally. No daughter should have to make that choice, but many have. So, if this is your story, I want to say something very clearly. You were not wrong for sensing it. You were not cruel for feeling hurt by it. You were not vain for wanting to be celebrated. You were not selfish for wanting your mother to be happy for you. You were not too much because her system could not hold your becoming. You were a daughter who deserved warmth, safety, and blessing where there was comparison, tension, and scarcity instead. And none of that is your shame to carry. You can put it down now. Your healing now is not about getting her to finally celebrate you correctly. For many women, that day does not come. The healing is in no longer making your relationship to yourself contingent on whether she can meet you there. The healing is in becoming the woman who can stay with her own radiance. The healing is in refusing to abandon your gifts because someone else was unsettled by them. The healing is in letting your life become bigger than the old emotional contract. And that may come with grief. It may come with anger. It may come with a very honest reckoning about what was and was not there. Let it. Because on the other side of that grief is a cleaner relationship with yourself, a more honest one, a less edited one, a less apologetic one. She's there. And eventually, a woman emerges who no longer feels guilty for being fully alive. I am Kat Grace. If this resonates, I want you to sit with one question. Where did you learn that your fullness was a problem? Not in theory, in your actual life. Where did you first begin to feel that being fully seen came with a cost? Start there. Because that is often where the untangling begins. If this is part of your story, stay with me. We are going deeper into these mother-daughter dynamics, the wounds they create, and what it truly takes to come back into yourself after years of distortion. If this has helped you, hit that like and subscribe button and share it with someone who may need this. Until next time, namaste.